All right. All right, Flare, let's bring this last part home here. This is part 3.
Sounds good.
Let's go right. Let's go right in the deuce hand. All right, so Vanek here opens 287 on the button. So if we're gonna play a hand here, usually in these games, what we want to do is we want to isolate 3-bet. We just want to get this hand heads up, even if it's out of position. We've seen Vanek definitely open a little bit light, so I think 3-betting would be slightly superior.
Yeah, these hands are just uncomfortable too. Like these work down like 8-7s, like when you're starting raw.
Yeah,
Too.
I mean, I would say generally, like if you weren't playing free-handed, if you were playing in a full ring game and someone opened the button, I'd probably just fold the deuce 8-7, honestly, even with an extra deuce. Um, it's just like you said, it's kind of a roughish hand where the best hand you can make again, you don't get to put a lot of action in. It's like, I mean, you can even make the case for like ditching the 8 right away. I would not say that against Vanek because I think Vanek's a little bit too rough. And here when you pair the 7, so you've seen 2 deuces, 2 sevens, and now you got 9, like a 9 draw. I would probably just keep the 9 draw, to be completely honest. Like this is a draw where I'm just gonna like. I don't love being out of position with a 9-8-7 here, but I also think like trying to quick back this hand on a later street is probably a little bit better. And just check calling and drawing 2 again in an 8-7 is not my favorite thing in the world. Plus, like this is a hand where you can just give up pretty quick. Like if you brick or if he raises or does something, you're just like, okay, I'm done. Oh, you decide to bluff. Okay, so if you decide to go for the snow in this situation, the thing though is that you did bet. Did I just totally miss that? So 2, he bets, you call. Okay, so if you're electing go for the snow, you usually have to play the aggression factor. So you can play it 2 ways. You can either lead pat or you can check raise pat. Either one. There's 2 different ways to play.
I'm honestly confused what I don't know if I misclicked there or what, but that doesn't seem like oh, we'll see. I guess I don't remember this hand specifically. You didn't watch
Okay.
that.
Yeah, well I'm just letting you know, like if
Yeah.
once we go that route, we and now we check, so now yeah, we have no showdown value. So
I misread my hand.
maybe you misread your hand. Yeah, you definitely misread your hand because we're checking in this situation. If we call with 7s, we're done. But yeah, you must have just totally misread it. I did not see that here before that one go.
Or I was playing Badusi. I'm not sure if I had a Badugi there, and I just didn't notice. So yeah, interesting.
All right, so we made a mistake. 9-3-6 around the button. I do not open 9s unless I have like a 4-card 9 and it's a good like smooth draw. So if like I had like 9, 3, 4, 3, 4, 6 or something like that here, I'd probably open it. So I think this might be just a little bit too loose, but I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. 2-2 spot. If you're going to improve to 1-card draw, we should bet and draw 1. Just because Vanek's most likely going to be leading. He does draw 1 here, but it's just kind of like whatever. And then he bets into you and you fold. That's probably fine given the fact that you have a 9 draw and there hasn't been a lot of action. The pot's like kind of small. So it's probably, if anything, it's a small mistake at that point, but it's not that big of a deal.
Okay.
Yeah, and then here with like the rough 8, if I would fold this one to CT, bad blockers.
Yeah, especially the CT. I agree.
Yeah, I don't love like necessarily making, well, it's kind of like this thing where, make a nice hand here in the 1-1 spot. So you make number 5. Looks like you're going to go for a check raise if you made it. I think actually with that type of hand, that's probably a good hand to consider doing it with. And then he pays you off with a 10, and that's probably okay on his part. But so yeah, I just wondering like that last hand, but that last hand seemed totally fun on your part. But yeah, you're going for a check raise, and I like to check raise usually like number 4 or number 5 because like it's the worst 7 to the best 8. The reason being is like those hands can call a 3-bet. But if you go for like this bet raise and then you decide like, oh, this hand's good enough to 3-bet, you get 4-bet, you're kind of puking. So for me, like that hand can easily call a 3-bet. But after that, I want to like slow down. And that's why I recommend to a lot of people in general, like don't try to check raise your wheels. Your wheels you want to get the most action in as you possibly can. So in a situation where you can have like a wide range, or you look like you could be a little bit snowy, or someone wants to put in like some thin value raises against you, like always go for the bets with wheels in my mind, because you want to get max value. This is like this good situation here with like a 1 card draw to a 9. Like if Vanek raises open raises here, like we should most like, I would say actually the majority of our 9 draws here in a 3-handed game, we probably want to 3-bet draw 1. Like if it's breakable, if we have like 9, 7, 4 deuce, I probably want to draw 2 in position. But this one with the straight draw, because obviously if you break the 9, you're drawing at the 3, 4, 6. I usually keep the 9 in this situation, so I would re-raise Vanek here and draw 1. Oh, you draw 2. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, now improve to a jack. And this is an interesting spot too, because now like your hand is basically with the straight draw in your hand, I think your hand is basically a bet and pat with the jack 6 if he calls you.
Watching this, that's what I'm thinking. So it'd be interesting to see if that's what.
Yeah, like if you had a pure draw here with the like 7, like we'll say 7, 7, 4, 3 deuce, I would break the jack for action, because again, you're running like very similar equities with respect to keeping the jack versus like keeping the 7 versus his draw. Like if it goes 1-1 and you have 7, 4, 3 deuce in position against him versus this jack, my guess is that like the equities are relatively the same, but you get obviously like you can break for more action and get more action if you make your hand. The jack 6 here, I believe with the straight draw, we want to keep the jack because we have a little bit more equity this way. And when he checks out, we just check back and then we lose. But I think that one was played fine in that spot there going to the river. Now we change the game as ace to 5. I saw you playing yesterday. Did you mix up ace to 5 and deuce to 7 at all?
Yeah, I did. I sure did. I made an 8-6 and somehow one hand won a base to 5 with an 8-6, betting it the whole way. So.
Yeah, it's. I gotta get on him about that one. Yeah, here ace 3-7 on the button. Yeah, definitely an open 3-handed. Definitely open this in a 6-handed game before on the button too. Nice that we have an ace. We get 3-bet. Nothing really changes. Like just notice like what blockers you have. Like 10-9. Now we're gonna have an extra 7. So 10-9, 7. So far this change. We've had a lot of these like random 9 spots, I feel like. And I think for the most part it seems like Vanek's usually pat in this situation, but I feel like he's also had like maybe 1 or 2 draw 1s. So if you're ever gonna, you definitely want a rougher draw if you ever want to go for like the raise with a rougher hand to try to get him to break something a little bit smoother than yours. This one's close because again, we're playing 3-handed, we're in position. Like I don't necessarily, like if we had like a 1-card 8 draw here, I would consider doing it, I think. But I think just calling and seeing what Vanek does is probably fine. The other thing too here is if we raise and we get 3-bet, we probably should just fold. But yeah, now we got to just break our 9. Our 9 I don't think is ever going to be that great here. Yeah. So he has like this like type of hand where I think against like I would see really tough players. I don't know the answer to this one, but I would say like players who are relatively like thinking, if you raise in this situation, I think they're breaking their 8. And that's why I was saying like that 9 in that spot is kind of it's kind of close if we wanted, like that's the type of hand where you want to do it with, but it really depends on the strength of your draw. And
Yeah, so that's an interesting concept that I don't necessarily deploy yet. Like that. Okay, so they draw 1. I've got a mediocre hand, like so I've got a 9. It's Vanek, so 9 is okay against his range, and especially if he's already there, I can get him to break potentially a better 9 or whatever. So you're saying like, would you still raise pat or would you raise draw 1?
Well, it depends on what he does now because you're in position. So in a situation where it goes 1-1, if he's betting a wide swath of his range, we'll say, and you have like that 9-7. Now, if he's going to bet like unimproved in this spot, honestly, we probably want to just raise for value, because if he's betting unimproved, I mean, you're going to have the best hand here like 75% of the time.
Yeah. So like you're saying if he doesn't pat the last draw.
No, I'm saying when it goes 1-1, if he decides to bet unimproved, like he's three bet you out of position, in the big blind. He bet the first draw, it went 1-1. Now he bet again. So if he's betting unimproved, if your opponent's betting unimproved, you make something like a 9 here, or specifically an 8, you probably should be raising here
Okay.
because he's betting way too much. That's more of the exploit. But in a 1-1 spot in general, if he's betting, what you want to do occasionally in these situations is you want to have like a rougher pat hand that has equity in position if they draw. Um, the hands that I think you want to do it with though are like the hands that don't necessarily want to call here in the situation and draw one. I don't think the 9-7 is necessarily that hand. And the reason being is a 7 draw and a heads up three-handed game is usually still like a good draw.
Mm-hmm.
Like obviously if he's got a 6, we're dead, but I mean like that's just the essence of the game. That's just kind of a different part of it. But I would definitely say like if somehow you had, we'll say 4, 5, 6 on the button, and then after the first draw you made it like an 8, a 1-card 8, and you called, that might be a really good hand to consider raising. If you make like 9-8, 6-5, 4, right? That might be the hand to consider doing it with, because your draw is not that strong. But if you get him to break a better hand in that situation, you become the favorite in position. And
Got it.
that's a scenario. Now, if he checks to you and you have 9-8 with in a 1-1 spot, you just bet pat and pray kind of thing. But in a 1-1 spot, if he's betting a lot, like if he's still betting like some 10s, 9s, 8s, those are the hands that you want to raise. Like that 9-8 specific hand, you might want to raise that hand to try to get him to break in position. Now, remember, like you don't want to do it all the time. Like every single time you make a 9, you don't want to do it, because if you're doing it, you're just doing it way too much. So it's usually like the hands that are just, I would say rougher, that where your draw is, it's just not as strong. But if you get him to break, or if you get to have the pat hand in position, you actually become the equity favorite.
No, that makes sense. And I mean, mostly I can say taking a passive line in those like middling spots where like even like if he would have not padded, I probably just check back the 9. Like I'm just gonna play it passive, especially against a player who I feel like has a wider range versus, kind of that thought process that you said of like, he doesn't always have to be super wide. And if you have a rough hand, essentially getting that equity back, like by possibly getting him to break.
Yeah,
It makes all the sense.
I think like 10 years ago, what would happen a lot in this situation is if, you make like any 9 or any 10 and they bet into you, you would just see the other player just like always raise, trying to get you to break a rougher draw. And then what the opponents started to figure out is like, oh, I should just keep my hand, because like they're just raising way too much in this situation. And then kind of like the counter to people just betting out of position way too much, they started to freeze in position. So there was like kind of like this counterbalance, I feel like, when you started to watch like people like raise too much versus like, okay, now I'm just going to call. Now I'm just going to, if you're betting way too much in the situation, I'm just going to freeze in position and get my hand to showdown. Therefore, I don't have to waste like an extra 2 bets to do it. I can do it pretty cheaply. Um, but yeah, like I would occasionally think of raising a rougher hand in position to try to get your opponent to break, but it's something that you just shouldn't do all the time. It's just more of something like an idea if you find yourself with a really really rough draw, but you've made like some sort of pat hand that has equity. Because if you like with your rough hands, you shouldn't have like a super rough hand here too often. But occasionally, if you do make like the 9-8 or something like that, and he bets into you, if you get him to break, now you got that hand in position as an equity favorite going into the last draw. So
Makes sense.
all right, here with ace 5, like most 2 wheel cards, any wheel card combination with an ace here, I'm going to defend and draw 3. There we go. Looks good. And then honestly, I probably just, yeah, check fold is fine. If you do check call, I'd probably draw 3 again into the ace 5 out of position. I don't think I would keep the 8. Yeah, here, this one we let go in ace to 5.
It's like some of those actions just trigger your opponents to kick up the aggression. Like you call a raise, you draw 3, you check call, you draw 3, and they're just basically gonna start bombing into you
Yeah,
a lot of
it
range,
it
and
in reality, like it's kind of like what they actually should be doing, because and the other thing too is like what you'll see if you study a little bit more of like the deuce, the deuce game too, or even like ace to five. A lot of times you're getting a good price to theoretically draw 2 on the last draw. Now, if your opponent's been pat, you shouldn't draw 2. But if your opponent has been drawing the whole time, usually like you're getting a price close to drawing to 2 in the last draw. And like your opponent should be betting thin in that situation when you're drawing 2, and if they draw 1 in that spot, like their bets should probably include like some kings kind of thing, their value bets. Because obviously, like when you draw 2, it's just harder to make a better hand. Here in this situation, I would open deuce 3 on the button. Like this is probably like the cutoff for me. Well, without an ace, so this is probably like the cutoff for me, like opening a 3-card draw. But I think deuce 3 is good enough to open, especially with an extra blocker. So I just wanted to point that one out. I'll speed it up just a little bit. What's been your favorite game so far transitioning to mix? Just curious.
The Dramaha based games I think are really fun. Dramaha Deuce to 7 also pretty fun because it's, not as scoopable, I think, and has some different ranges. It's also a new addition to the local live game. So, new, less information kind of thing. But yeah, I think the Dramaha Deuce to 7, the Raz Deuce to 7 is just kind of a fun, nuanced game as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a different take on Raz for sure. So this one here, I would probably just throw away the 8. I think like drawing pretty rough to the 8 here and out of position. I would probably just draw 3 to the wheel. Try to catch an 8. No, I think you had an extra 8 just rewind it. Yeah, we'd have an extra 8 here too. So usually when you have like, it is something to notice too. If like you draw 2, if you throw away 2 8s on the first draw, like 9s become a little bit better. So looks like we check call and then check call one more time. And this is one of the reasons I like folding or drawing 3 is because like now you're in this situation where you have like a really, really rough draw out of position against a guy drawing 1. And theoretically, if you bets here, you might actually be getting close to the right price, but your draw is so rough that like folding might be slightly better anyways, because like it's going to be hard to play that one out of position anyways. But yeah, when you're out of position, like when you're out of position, I think a good rule of thumb is like draw as smooth as you can. Now that doesn't mean sacrificing like mediocre 1-card draws. Like if someone raises the cutoff and you're in the small blind with like deuce 3 4 7 and deuce to 7, or I'm sorry deuce 3 7 8, like you're drawing to an 87 right away. Like don't break and draw 2. Like keep like you're drawing 1 in that situation. There's no doubt about it. But when you're like when you are out of position, like in this 3-handed game here, even keeping the 8, it reduces your playability on later streets, especially out of position. So I would just try to draw a little bit smoother. And I think the equity's got to be close too. Like drawing to a 3-card 8 and ace to 5 versus drawing to a 2-card 5 deuce is probably close to the same thing. Here you have a really nice hand, the 2-5-8. Yeah, this is so in most Raz games, like if you're just going to be playing against another opponent, we just go ahead and reopen the action and just 2-bet. Super strong draw, obviously. Like we have the flush draw right now, but it's just it's kind of irrelevant. Well, it's getting more relevant now.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, once he catches a king and you catch a 3, easy bet. Oh, he leaves now. Oh, it's like everyone just wants to play 3-handed, but just not more. Yeah, 9-8 deuce here, good open, 3-handed game. It is a note. So like now the other thing too is like you want to note what cards are dead too, because like obviously the 5 and the 6.
Need both.
Yeah, you leave both of those. But obviously now you make a 7 and you're in the lead, so should just go ahead and bet.
Wouldn't be able to see it so easily in hindsight.
Well, I mean, at the time too, you were learning too. I mean, it's just, I mean, it's good when you see it in hindsight because it's like, oh yeah, I was making mistakes. So now he's drawing to a 10, you're drawing to a 9. Yeah, you can't really fold. The only question here on the river is do we call against the 10? But once he checks, it's like an easy check back. And yeah, he had a 10. So you had 10, 8, 5, 10, 8 deuce, 10, 10, 8, 7, 5 deuce. I'll show you a quick story. I remember years ago I was playing in, I think it was just a Limit Omaha tournament, and I had Phil Ivey on my right, and I think it was the 1500, and I remember giving Ivy in a spot like I had like second nut low with no high, and um I remember like giving Ivy like a free showdown kind of like in a situation where I felt like I really should have bet my hand. And I was so mad at myself because like here's basically at the time what was perceived to be, like one of the best players in the world, obviously still is one of the best players in the world. And I still like didn't put any pressure on him kind of thing to like, make him to fold his hand. I think I saw his hand afterwards and I don't think he would have mucked his hand, but still like I didn't put any pressure on him to do it. And you just start to learn like one of those things is you need to put those pressures up because if you're giving opponents like free opportunity, if you're checking and giving your opponents free opportunities, like you're giving them a part of that pot by doing that every single time. You're like giving them some free money. 10 10 8 5 here on the button. I'd probably fold this one. Yeah, like if it was double suited I'd open it. If the 8 was something a little bit lower or better, maybe like 4 5 5 6, I might open those two tens. We're playing limit 08. Yeah, here's a great example of like a three-handed game where you have an ace, a Broadway card, and a wheel card, and it just usually you just start going crazy. So I tend to three bet these hands, calling with some portion of them, like four flushes, three flushes, rainbow stuff like that. I think is also fine. Um, I think you're full. I think we're probably supposed to continue on this board even with our hand, but I mean the board's pretty raggedy, so I don't fault you for folding that one specifically. Now here like 3 3 6 7 in the small blind. If CC folds, this becomes a pretty easy open just because we have like four cards, like low cards in our hand for the most part. There's not too many combos unless like you have like 8 7 deuce deuce that we're probably not playing. But this is a hand that we're definitely going to be playing small blind versus big blind. Pretty good flop for you range wise, obviously, like two deuces and an ace. Plus we have like, some low equity too. Now here when we have the here like I see some people check this board on this turn, and I actually think this is a good hand to consider. We'll say semi-bluffing slash just trying to get my opponent to I guess semi-bluffing is the right word, just because like now you have two threes in your hand, so you block like a lot of the combos of your opponent having 3 4, having nut low. So they don't get to raise too much in this situation. Also, again, this board is still like favorable for you. Like your opponent did peel this flop, but again, he should probably peel it with like a lot of aces and stuff. So I think like betting this turn card is totally fine. You're gonna see most likely a turn in a river when you have this hand in this low. And the bet definitely goes in better for you, I think, on the turn. And then like once you get to the river, we can reevaluate. But I definitely think once this turn card comes and we block two combos of the nut low draw, I probably block more of those. Like, yeah, once we get to the river, here's like nothing changes. I know I don't expect my opponent to ever fold. So I actually think probably checking this river now is a little bit better because like nothing's changed.
Sure.
Like if the board was maybe a little bit different and the flop was like ace 10 deuce and then the turn was an 8, like he could have some high draws here. And the river's like another deuce is pretty favorable to you. I'd go ahead and bet. But the way the board has run out now, these like two low cards, third low card, and like high card, nothing's changed. So I actually think like now more often than not, you're getting free rolled versus CT.
Yeah, I mean, I'm betting into like all single pair of aces. I mean, boats we're just sitting waiting, and I'm gonna have to cry call a raise as well.
Sure. So yeah, I would just go ahead and check to him, I think here. And there's like, sometimes here he's just gonna have like 4 or 5 king, and that hand scoops you. I think more often than not, what ends up happening is like you just run into the random hand that like has 4 or 4 5 8, something like that just scoops you. So, and they're not folding that hand. So once you kind of get this run out on this board, I don't think there's any that the fold equity is kind of gone, and I would just go ahead and check. But I think both you guys played your hand fine. CT's hand's close to a 3-bet preflop with like a suited ace and two like lowish cards, but besides that, you guys played it fine. Okay, here we go. Aces with a 6 and a 9 on the button. Like we're raising any aces. The only question here is do we 4-bet or do we just call the 3-bet and like kind of like if your opponent is just way too aggressive after they 3-bet preflop, I think that you can do some cold calling with aces, but in general, I think you want to be doing a lot of 4-betting with your aces. So obviously you get a very favorable flop for your 4-bet range. Anytime like an ace hits the board, I think it's super favorable to the 4-betters range. So we're gonna most likely bet this flop high. Turn is not a great card for you, but at the same time too, like if he checks to us, I don't think we get to check this one back. We have no diamonds. We do have a 6, but it's not like I wouldn't say that blocks a lot of the straight draws per se. So I think if he checks to you, we just got to bet again. Sometimes he's going to pay us off with like ace 8 or ace deuce. Obviously, we have a 9, so that kind of reduces the combos of him having like ace 9. And if he check raises, like it's so be it. We have 3 aces. Like whatever.
Yeah, some monsters under the bed. You can't just start.
Yeah,
playing
you can't
because
start like checking this back. Like yeah, obviously that's a good outcome for us right there. But yeah, I mean, there are definite times like let's say this pot was like 4 ways. Well, even if this pot was 4 ways, we're still pushing a lot of equity with our 3 aces. But I'm trying to come up with trying to think of like an example here where I'd have to think on this one, where the examples are of like, you kind of like unblock your opponent. So now it's like much more likely he has something. Like maybe if you just had like ace 9, maybe if you had something like ace 9, king, queen here, and the turn's a deuce and we have no diamonds, that might make a little bit more sense to where we like consider checking back because we unblock all the low cards. We don't have any diamonds. Like if my opponent's prone to check raising like pretty thin, like some players here might like check raise 6, 7 of diamonds kind of thing. They gain their free rolling. And if they're right, like obviously it's a small catastrophe for you, but obviously like a range on range thing here. It's something that they probably shouldn't do too often, but I do see people occasionally do that. But yeah, like we just don't slow down usually with like top set on a board where we're heads up and we 4-bet pre-flop. Here, ace 3, 5, 9, the big blind. Obviously, this is going to be a play. I would say this is one where when you have the 9 in your hand, you don't have like the extra face card, no suited ace. I think this is probably a good candidate to just cold call in the big blind. You flop relatively big. You flop middle pair, second nut low, 3-handed. This is probably a hand you can consider check raising, honestly. It's you're going to be free rolling here a fair bit. And we don't have I guess that's our gut shot. We still, I guess, don't have a gut shot. Yeah, at this point, like, if once we check call twice, I think like check calling the river is probably best.
Yeah, it's almost like the hand is just so face up at that juncture too.
Yeah,
I find a way to just scoop against the.
Yeah, this is a good example too, where CT had a fine hand, and it's just you just had him scooped kind of thing. And this is one of the reasons too we like to flat call with like 3 wheel cards with an ace in our hand in the big blind is we want to make sure that we're not polarizing our range too much when we 3-bet in the big blind. So we have like some of these hands, and this is a good candidate to do it with because like he should definitely be raising like 3, 4, 6 queen double suited here on the button, and those are the type of hands we're trying to like basically pick off and scoop in this situation. So I actually think he makes a pretty good check back considering what he had a 4 and 3, 6. Like he didn't think necessarily there was a lot of value betting, so he makes a nice bet, and unfortunately we missed out on that bet because of it too. So I'm not saying he would have like if you check raise this flop and you bet down, he probably should just call down with his hand too. So theoretically we miss like small bet plus 1 big bet kind of thing. But it's just more Yeah, when we have these like hands three-handed, like if we had this hand on this board versus a player under the gun in like a 6 or 9-handed game, I don't think check raising is this right play. But in a three-handed game against a button opener, he should be so much wider than that other player that you know, like this hand becomes really strong on this board. We're just doing I wouldn't say free rolling, but we're pushing the equity more than our opponent. All right, King 10 Jack Deuce I think is just a fold. I think even if CC opens, it's a fold, and probably just a fold against CT. Like it's pretty, it's double suited, but when you don't have any low equity, you usually need, I would say like a good rule of thumb is you usually need an ace in your hand to continue. Oops. Stats for nerds. Google, you're funny. 248 here. Nice starting hand on the button. Rainbow. All right, here 3-7 in the big. Again, like we do have 3-5-7, but I don't really want to like reduce my chances of making a Badugi that fast. I think I want to draw 3. So we draw 2 again. Yeah, like once we draw the first turn, we're just drawing 2 again, I think. Yeah, and then here out of position against CT drawing 1, like we make a 10 low. But again, like the reverse implied odds of calling down here, I think, are quite bad. I actually think this is kind of I would say a wider attempt than what you would normally see, because like obviously you started with the 2 spades, now you made a 3rd spade. But if we start calling out of position here, hoping to get half, we're basically going to have, you got to think about like, what does this mean for us? We're going to have to call $4 into an $8 pot. CT's probably going to bet twice. So it looks like 16, we're going to fall. We got to win with this hand 25% of the time to break even. And I think it's probably close, but I think the reverse implied odds, we can probably just let this one go too. Because I think what ends up happening is CT probably breaks better sometimes. You know, like in position here with like a 1, he'll probably break all 10s if you pat. That's my guess. But interesting we draw, I guess. This goes back to the kind of the concept, like if you have a rough draw like 9-7-3-5 out of position, like it's probably better to just like keep the pat hand because your draw is rough anyways. Yeah, and then we fold. Obviously, when we make a king, we fold.
It almost seems like a wasted bet. Like if you're gonna call draw 2 on the second draw, I would have rather just raised Pat and see if I can get him to break a 10, or find out if he's just playing like a rough Badugi or something like that.
Well, I mean that's
for the buddy
like that.
kind of thing.
And again, going back to like what we were talking about earlier, like that might actually be a hand to consider, like semi bluffing, where you don't really have a lot of showdown value for your Badugi. You have some deuce to 7 showdown value for your low. You're usually check raising strong hands in that position. So maybe adding a hand like that, I wouldn't necessarily call it suicidal. I would call it like maybe that's a good hand to consider semi bluffing if he doesn't have a Badugi. It gets expensive though, so it depends really how sticky your opponent is. If your opponent's going to show down like any 3-card 6 kind of thing, like I would not do it. But if your opponent's going to make like some folds with 3 cards once you decide to check raise like pat your hand, then it's an interesting one to consider. I'll put that one out there. I wouldn't say that I would necessarily do it, but I always say like it's just hard to find in the no qualifier games. It's hard to find bluffs. It's just so hard to find bluffs because like they just call you with anything, you know, because there's
the backup, the plan.
You're always at least going for half a pot one way or the other, you know. So it's just really hard to bluff and find the bluffs, I would say. Yeah, 3 queens here. Let this one go. Kick it forward a little bit. Pat. Oh, that's a big hand. 9 and a 6. Or 7 and a 6. Usually that's a big hand. Yeah, on the button here with the and again, this is a similar situation where like I would have ditched the 4 and drawn 3 at the 3-5. Yep. Here you have a 10 doogie, and I would say like the 10 doogie in general is fine to keep heads up in like a shorthanded game. If CT opens, I'm probably drawing 2. But if CC opens, I'm considering re-raising and just keeping the 10 and drawing 1. And again, like if you decide to re-raise, like he's gonna have a lot of 3-card like 3-card draws here. And if you keep the 10, I use this expression like you can use a little bit of that momentum to kind of get him to just fold his hand on an earlier street. Yeah, this is just a small bug, it seems like, where your hand's still highlighted even though you folded. Seen that a couple times. All right. Yep, Badoogie 4-3-2-1, all different suits.
I think I just decided to play the last 6 of these hands, and I don't think we make anything well, but yeah, I think overall, just kind of watching this back, and obviously it's a pretty simple heuristic to discuss, but like there's a lot of chips that were given in, poor to medium spots, continuing, that if they were still in my stack at this juncture, we're probably well above our buy-in and profitable on this small session. So that's something I've been, really trying to focus on, is like, keeping track of like the am not sure plays, because at the end of the day, it's not like I'm saying, oh, I'm trying to punt here. Let's just see if we can make a 6 or something. Like I'm just not sure. Right. So we're going to move forward and experiment with it, though. It's good to hear back, but I also try to keep track of these things. And I think in this session specifically, if we would have had a lot, like even say 50% of those am not sure spots back and just made like a fold and moved on to the next hand, I wouldn't be shocked to see, probably $130 in my stack here versus being down, $10 after an hour, which is not bad. It's not a bad result or anything, but just something that I, try to keep track of and I'm aware of like these middling spots, because the easy hands seem like there's obviously ways to be more efficient, but they're not as like unsure. Make a 7. Okay, well, it's bet. But, I've got a 10 Badoogie. Do I break it? Like the hand you were just describing, like those like in hands, I think those chips start to add up really quickly if you have a lot of those medium spots. And I think in mix, you get put in a lot of those medium type spots pretty frequently, especially multi-way.
Yeah, it's and we were kind of like talking about this before we started again today, and it's just hard to play all the games well. There's just so many different games, and there's a lot of nuances. Like obviously Badoogie, Badusi, Badaci, like those games have a little bit of triple draw for the most part. Like they have like little bit of pieces that you can kind of put together at the same time. But when you go to a stud game, to a flop game, to a draw game, to a different draw game, to a different stud game where the strategy is completely different, like it's just hard. So like yeah, when you start like figuring out these little spots, like you can also kind of start to compare them to different games too at the same time, and you're like, oh, I'm making this mistake out of position here in this game. This is something that I've taken over from like maybe Deuce or Badoogie. Now I'm going to implement it more in like my Badusi or Badaci game. Yeah, those things you like learn over time, and you start to make an adjustment. And yeah, I think yeah, it just takes time. And my wife always says, and I give her credit for this one, she always says, like, give yourself grace, because like when you're learning it, like it just takes time. And like a lot of times you're playing against players who've been playing for a long time. The difference between like playing a $1 $2 game or 50-cent $1 game on Phenom versus like the 6-12 game, a lot of times like is vastly different, because a lot of those players have been playing the game for like decades, kind of thing. So yeah, I would say just like give yourself grace when you're learning, and just always keep trying to learn. I think that's like a good, yeah, just keep trying to improve. As long as you're trying to improve and you're learning, like you'll just always be ahead of your competition, like especially at low to mid stakes for the most part. This is actually, I want to go to this hand real quick because this is kind of interesting. So you start with Deuce 8. Defending, I think, is fine. Probably like close to the bottom of the range, but whatever. You improve the Deuce 4, you check call again, and CT's drawing 1 and he's pat. Now you're making Jack Badoogie. Um, I'm probably, given the price here, this is probably one of the worst Badoogies I'm gonna have. Like if I make a king or queen here, I'll probably just fold against CT. Given the fact that I made a jack, it's a hand that I think I'm going to check call out of position, and I think I'll just pat out of position, and I mean honestly you could theoretically just check fold this hand honestly too. I think it's close. I don't think I'm going to check raise. I think it's too optimistic against his range, and I think it just gets really expensive to do it in like this size pot. But if you're going to do anything here, I think check calling and trying to like freeze out of position here might be your best bet. And honestly, folding the Jack 10 might also be your best play too. It's kind of like it's kind of close. Like I there's probably a small difference between the right answer and like the next best answer, but it's probably not that big. So you freeze out of position, and now here's the thing too. Like he'd snap check back too if you saw that. Like again, it's more of a timing tell, and like I would say like I've seen CT bluff a lot frequently, just kind of in these situations, but I feel like Jack 10 is probably one of the worst Badoogies that I have in the situation too. So if he bets here, I'm probably just folding anyways. Never fold. I probably just like never folding a 9 better. Yeah, he does have 9-6. So
So a question for you on that hand. Instead of instead of having a Jack 10, so like essentially we've got a rough Jack. What if we had a smooth Jack there? Would that be a spot where that you would consider, going for potentially that check raise and then like having like the ability to even then break your Jack with a really smooth draw?
well, the problem is
Or does it open up more? I guess the question would be like, does it open up more creativity if the Jack was smooth for you to do something different, or do you is still just either freeze and accept your fate or freeze fold?
so actually one of the sites that so I always recommend like Ken Lo's book, Mix Games, because it has a lot of good intro for people who are learning to play mix. Um, in there is kind of like there's like a big list of like what the Badoogies look like number 1 up to like number 715, I think it is, which is like King Queen Jack 10 Rainbow. Um, also, there's another site that I totally forgot about for the last 5 years, and I just refound it again last night because I was looking for combos in Ace to Five. I was trying to specifically, I was thinking of like where can I find the combos for the sevens, because like we were talking about like the distribution of what the sevens look like. It didn't have it per se, but I'm glad I found the site again. The site's countingouts.com, and it has a lot of good intro information with respect to like what the math actually looks like, um, for a lot of the mixed games. So like what those look like too. Now, with respect to your question, usually we only try to do that in position, because when we're in position, we now know what our opponent's going to do. So we get to act after them last. So if like we have a Jack 6, theoretically what you should be doing here is like you should have some hands that you want to check raise and just try to get your opponent to fold immediately. Those hands are pretty few and far between. I also think too, like Jack 6 is a hand that might actually be a little bit too smooth with like showdown value to consider breaking. Now, like Jack 10 is actually like Jack 10 could actually be the one where you like I would consider like check raising, trying to get my opponent to fold. And like if he pats and pat, and if he doesn't break, then just give up. Like that might be actually the hand to do it with, because like it's just rough. Like your draw is bad. You can't check call draw 1 at the 10. That doesn't make sense. Like a Jack 10 and a 10 draw are kind of like the same thing in that position. So what I would do in this situation is probably what you did, and I'd probably just fold the river, just given like where we're at in the distribution of our hands. But um yeah, like that play that you're asking specifically is more of like an in position play, because now we have the information of what our opponent's doing. All right, let's go to the I guess the final 2-ish hands.
Almost done.
Yeah, 2 card 9 here. Muck it. Maybe we got one more to play. Let's see here, I'll speed this one up just a little bit. 3-5-8 wins. Interesting to see 3-5-8 win. because usually your opponents, if they can't beat the 3-5-8, they're usually doing some betting themselves, like kind of bluffing. Okay, so 4-5-7 here in position against CC. For the most part here, I'd say like if there's so many 2-card opens in Badugi in this spot, like I think the majority of our continuing range is 3-betting a lot of our 1-card draws, especially in a 3-handed game. And it's not like a huge error too either, because like if he does take 2 in the situation and he checks to you, you just bet your hand in a 2-1 spot because you have the draw lead. And he folds, which is it's pretty surprising actually. But okay. Oh, Queen Badugi. All right. Yeah, this one's just a raise. This one's just a raise pat pray kind of thing.
Yeah.
You don't really want to get like CT 3-betting you and then you got to 4-bet this hand, but the problem with your draw here we go. I'm gonna oracle this one out, I guess. The problem with your draw here is if you decide to draw 1. Actually, it's kind of interesting because you actually have a hand that has no showdown value 3-card wise. Like 8-7-6 doesn't really have any showdown value. But like say CT's pat after this first draw and then decides to like check back after the first draw or something like kind of crazy. Like this is a hand where you can actually break and draw to the 8 and just give up because like you don't have any showdown value. Like you're just gonna have to find a way to improve your hand. But with the fact that you have a Badugi here, I think we have to 4-bet this hand. It goes pat. Interesting. So you 3-bet, you call. Now you have to understand like where are you at in the distribution between like all pat Badugis. The first question you have to ask is, does your opponent have 100% of Badugis? If they have 100% of the Doogies, the average hand here I think is like Queen 7-5 deuce. So you're just above that threshold. So if that's the case, and your opponent probably like, the problem is your opponent probably has 100 Badugis here. So you decide to break the queen. Honestly, I'm totally fine with it. Like, give yourself a shot to win this pot. There's more playability. If you make an 8 here, or even like maybe even a 9, like you get to check raise.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, in game, I think against this opponent with CT, and honestly, not knowing that Queen 7-5 is the average Badugi, and probably giving him like 10s when he pats there, in my mind, somewhere in that area, I just feel like it has to be broken. But I also think that if I can make an 8, it can beat some portion of his range. Like I don't just have to give him a 4.
Yeah, and I also think too, you can actually remove like part of their range here too. I think like a very small portion of the range, like their kings and queens with like 3-card 5s, maybe even 3-card 6s. I don't think they're keeping. I think they're drawing when you pat in front of them, and they probably should. Like again, it's somewhat of the same equity. They're hoping to target a specific portion of their range. So maybe like the queen smooth is a little bit different, but yeah, you got to remove like some of the king Badugis with like smooth draws. So we draw here. And now I think so we're going to check. Obviously he's going to bet. And then given the price, I think we're not getting a good enough price probably to continue here. So I probably just let this one go.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, he does have a king.
Well,
I mean, that's the thing. Like in these like wide range like spots out of position, the other thing too is just like hanging on with a queen out of position there is just it's tough because your opponent with like a rough king in that spot is gonna want to try to get you to break. But in all fairness, like once you pat your hand, there shouldn't be like a ton of hands that get you to break. You just kind of had like one of those hands that didn't really have like good showdown value to just like break it immediately. Like if you had, Queen 4 or something like that, you probably would have broken it. But those wide range Badugi spots when you have like, you're higher up in your Badugi range, they're just tough. Because like you're just gonna hold on for 3 streets and try to check call down with a queen doesn't seem like too optimistic. Because like if your opponent's keeping a king, like a lot of times he's willing to bet all 3 streets to try to get you to fold. And like GTO's.
Well, he has all the information, right? Like, so he probably knows he's behind now, and he has to do everything in his power, which is basically, I mean, he obviously he can choose to break if he wants to, but once he goes the route of I'm just gonna pat bet and hope I can get him to break, kind of thing, and it worked on 3-1, or on the first draw, you know, again, like being out of position, like he gets to apply that pressure, whereas like I'm in the, you know, pat and pray mode.
Yeah.
But I think that like so like earlier in one of these we talked about like even your countingouts.com. Like in game I would honestly probably say I was putting an average Badoogie somewhere near like a roughish jack kind of thing.
Sure.
So I think my range is weaker than it actually is, not having complete information. So there's that piece of it. And it just goes to show you how, knowing where I'm actually sitting in range on range, in full confidence, would have potentially helped me play the hand slightly better. But yeah, again, just kind of an interesting spot to see at the end there. But it's those middling spots that I think are opportunities to both extract more chips and also save chips that I tend to see throughout the play.
Sure. I think that's going to be the end of it right there. Yeah. So, oh, well, he might just get a walk here. Oh, no, there we go. So, yeah, the other thing too is just as a note, like, if like someone opens under the gun, they shouldn't have like 100% of Badoogies. So I wouldn't use that as like oh, I have Queen 7 here. I'm like right in the median Badoogies. Most of your unbreakable kings and unbreakable queens in early position are like usually unplayable. So take a note of that. Just as like some of their ranges is removed. They don't necessarily in a blind versus blind. Yeah, your opponent probably has 100% of Badoogies, but in an early, I would say like more of an earlier setup, you have to remove like part of the range. That's just like more of a note. But that's the video, man. We got through all 3 parts.
Man, I can't thank you enough. I'm excited to start watching them back as they come out, and obviously excited to continue to implement some of the things that we've discussed and to keep studying. So I appreciate the content and look forward to following the journey on YouTube and continuing to play on Phenom.
Yeah,
Thank you,
yeah.
man.
No, I would say like if there were 2 takeaways from you after watching the play and like kind of analyzing it is this, if the easy one for you, I think is just if you're gonna play a hand, just come in for an open race. Pretty simplistic, And the second one is like if you're out of position drawing, you want to usually make sure you have like some playability. You don't want to be like super rough, especially from the start. So I would just maybe clean up the beginning draws in a couple of the games and just try to draw a little bit smoother. But besides that, it's a poker's a game you're just going to play your whole life anyways, pretty much. So just try to keep improving as much as you can. And
Again, appreciate it.
yeah, again, anyone else, if you got any videos you want to send in and want some analysis just like this, just let me know. But Flurry, thank you so much for sitting with me and doing some analysis and taking the first step, because steps like these can, you need to be definitely need to be brave to take the first step to be the first one to have your play analyzed. So hope I wasn't too rough on you.
No, I'll take it. I'll always take the feedback.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks guys for watching. Again, comments, questions, feedback below, much appreciated. Until then, I will talk to you guys soon. Play well. Good luck at the tables. Bye-bye.